Got it. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for our March edition of DevOps DC. Today, we have Casey Watts.
Oh, sorry. Fast, too fast. Okay.
So here's our agenda. 15 minutes of a meet and greet, and we're just a couple minutes right on over. We'll do our introductions and announcements, which is right now. And then kicking off maybe a little bit before 7, because I speak kind of quickly, if that's all right. We'll start with our LGBTQIA plus inclusive environment workshop with Casey Watts. Here's our code of conduct. I'm not going to go through it all the way, but we do have the code of conduct also posted up on our meetup.com DevOps DC page, and where you may review there or even comment as well. So here's your organizers for this evening. You have Christina, Victoria, and myself. And here's where you can find us online. I think Victoria and I are just the folks on Twitter, but we have a group on LinkedIn as well, where we can communicate and hang out and just have another social media platform.
Awesome. And those links, I just put them in chat. And, I don't have a Twitter, but I am on Twitch. So if y'all want to find me there, you can. I will put those contacts in the chat as well.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all want to say a little bit about yourselves as the organizers.
Victoria. I'll say it, and then Victoria, you can end it.
Okay, yes.
Okay. So my name's Christina. I've been with this group for a little over a year now, but I've known this group for over 4, and it's just a delight to see it evolve through COVID and all the many things. But Christina and Ian from Rhythmic Technologies, we are your drama-free IT full-service provider of AWS and all things AWS related. And a delight to be here, and it saddens me, but it's going to be a great day. It's going to be a great day. It only saddens me because of Victoria, nothing else.
Yes, this is my last event as an organizer of DevOps DC. I was a VP of operations for Pluribus Digital. Just recently, or in the last year, moved to California. And so now I'm going to be switching over to California meetups. I'm looking for roles in California or more globally based companies. And I also started my own LLC, and I'm doing consulting work on the side at the same time. So I've been very busy, but hope to continue to be a member of DevOps DC and show up occasionally, and also hopefully still be creating some DevOps content for the San Diego area as well. So that's all about me.
And I am Trevor. I've been a part of the group, I think it's about, as an organizer, early 2018, Victoria, I think, but part of the group much longer. I always say if you show up enough and participate enough, then you get invited to help coordinate things. But I work in both the DevOps and information security communities, and I really like to bridge the gaps and open communication streams as well, so that we have not just developers or operations people or security people siloed, but also ultimately working together in an inclusive way. I'm sorry.
All right.
Here are some updates. We have been working on streamlining and providing a quality of life, not just for you, but also us organizers, and sponsors, or those that want to talk. We've created new forms. You can find them on the DC meetup page, DevOps DC meetup page. And what we started doing as well is recording the talks so that they'll be posted on YouTube. Posted on YouTube. YouTube has closed captioning technology, so it helps us there as well. And we have been talking about a potential return to in-person events. We have to do some coordinating with the event spaces to see what their corporate policies are, or just work around or work with them directly on what their policies are, and really gauge what we can do in the future as far as in-person events. We have been talking about doing little socials, but as we continue to explore these options, we'll keep the group updated here. So we took a word art, I think back in January, to really get a good feel and gauge what topics people were most interested in. And I really like the upside down smiley. That makes my day every time I see that. Some of the words got broken up, like security factory or software factory, but what everybody really wanted, as you can see, is CI/CD, Kubernetes, and GitOps.
And we thankfully did a Kubernetes presentation last month, and we are working on a couple of things between the next future events here, between GitOps and CI/CD. So stay tuned, everybody, on our DC meetup page or in Slack itself.
And I will point out DevOps Culture is in the top left over there. And this is certainly one of our more culture related talks. And I think that we as organizers prioritize that it's not always just about the tech and automation part, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly. Here's where you may find us online. There's a wonderful Slack, humongous. There's like over 7,000 people on there, dctechslack.com. We have our friends, our counterparts over at slack.baltimoretech.org for their DevOps community up there as well. There's where you may find us on LinkedIn and also Twitter.
Awesome. And some other events that, again, we like to support. And if you would like to share your event in your group, please just find us, one of the organizers here, and we can update it on this slide as well. But this is kind of my hit list of pickings that I do literally every 10 days, just to find out what's good out there in the world. Stay tuned for some of them already. As you guys can see, it is kind of representing the month of Women's History Month. And I want to just point out on the 30th of March, that is my other networking group that I am a part of. And we are doing the secrets, risks, and lessons learned of taking the leap into tech. So it is 4 lovely ladies, including myself at Rhythmic Technology, sharing all of our knowledge, sharing all of our parental tips. I'm not the parent. I have 3 other ladies that are parents, and they have some really cool tips to share to just juggle work-life balance and things. So if you're interested and want to just tune in, please save the date. That is a lunchtime time frame at 11 a.m. So if you guys can check out those events, and I will put these lists of events in the chat as well. And you can also find that on our post-event announcement afterwards too. And if you have any events that you are interested in and want to share, please unmute. You can let us know right now. Otherwise, we can put it into chat and we can be sure to include it in our post-event notifications. Any thoughts, any questions? All right.
Here are other ways to stay in touch with us. A little bit repetitive, a bit redundant, but once again, our Slack workspaces and channels that we're in, as well as where we are on GitHub and finding other speaking or sponsoring opportunities. And there's our email as well to be able to contact us directly.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, once again, thank you all for joining us. And with that, we'll kick it off with you, Casey Watts.
Yay.
Wow.
We're ready. I'm ready. Hit start. Slack. Sorry, it's the wrong app. I'm always complaining at Slack. This is Zoom. Zoom. All right, my slides are sharing, pretty sure.
Yep.
Now I have to do a couple more configs. If you've hosted a Zoom meeting, you know you have all your windows right, and then you hit screen share, and then they're all wrong.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
All right, we're in. All right, thanks for coming. So glad to be here. I'm gonna do a little bit of intro stuff before we hop into content. I've given this talk a bunch of times. It's always getting better. I'd love your feedback at the end. There's a feedback form. I wanna thank some people who helped me with this. Clara Richards is a good friend of mine. She developed this content with me. And my partner, Brian Young. He workshopped everything with me. I wanna thank them both. A little bit about me. Who am I? Why am I here? Hi, I'm Casey. Let's look at the right part. I wrote a book, Debugging Your Brain. I'm a co-host of the human-centered podcast Greater Than Code, which is a great podcast if you like those. I've been a keynote speaker and event MC at a lot of stuff, including Nation.js here in DC. I have a background in neuroscience, which is different than the average developer. Another background in teaching. I taught a full stack bootcamp before they were a thing back at Yale with the Entrepreneurial Institute. I also facilitate and train and do lots of events. I like to sing and dance and blow bubbles. You can see my trombone behind me and my keyboard, blowing bubbles in the park in DuPont Circle. I'll share that when we get to do it again. That's an event you all might want to come to. I have backgrounds in product design, engineering, and management, including at Heroku and for the US government, both. There's also a community I'll share links for, Empathy in Tech, which is an online Discord server and an event series. And there's an event series coming up that I'll share too. It's kind of like how to tell if you have a good cultural fit with your current job and whether to leave and how to leave. It's a whole bunch of events like that in a series. All right, enough about me. Let's talk DevOps. This is a page from the DevOps State of DevOps Report 2021 that talks about belonging and inclusion and how it correlates to the outcomes that we go for with DevOps work. If you haven't read the DevOps 2021 report or the older ones, I definitely recommend them. There's so much good stuff in there. And then I'll include a link to that in the notes that I share at the end too. All right, in this workshop, in the next hour and a half, or hour probably, what we're going to cover is why should we even talk about this stuff? I'll give you some examples of LGBTQIA individuals like me and my friends, and then you will, to yourself quietly, explore gender-related traits that you might not have thought about before. Or even if you have, I hope you'll get more depth from my prompting. All right, some definitions for today's talk. One here is I'll try to use this phrase, affected people. And that's anyone negatively affected by policies and social norms, microaggressions, and things like that. Whether they're offended or not is irrelevant. If they're affected by it, that's what I'm talking about. So they don't have to be personally offended or personally hurt, but if they are like disadvantaged for it, they're affected. This is often based on classes and traits. I'll cover a bunch of them here in a sec. And then I also want to call out that affected means directly affected, because of course we're all affected if someone is getting these microaggression experience. It does affect all of us indirectly also. Gender and sexuality is one category of the protected civil rights classes. Here's the list of the protected ones on the left. And there's a whole bunch of other ones on the right that we care about that aren't protected on the federal level. What we're talking about today kind of applies to all of these, but we're going to focus in on sexual orientation and gender identity. I get things wrong. I'm going to say things that in a year from now might be embarrassing because I said that thing, because language is changing, our perspective is changing, and I don't know it all. You don't know it all either, and you're going to get mistakes too, and that's normal. I'd like to instead focus on how do we recover from things and how do we prevent issues from happening once we know that they're preventable. We're going to do one breakout room today, and that's right after this slide. If you don't want to be in a breakout room, that's okay. But now I need you to update your Zoom name to something like no breakout at the beginning. You can also take this chance to update your pronouns if you are so inclined. We'll also cover why and who that helps later in this talk. I'll give you all a second to rename yourself if you want to do that. Here's a screenshot of it. You can do the ... at the top right of your face and then go down to rename.
Done.
Great, great. By the way, you may have to edit it every time you sign into a Zoom meeting because Zoom, I can't explain it, but it changes my name back all the time and I hate it. All right, it's time for an activity. We're going to do this one in 3 parts. Solo, I'm going to set a timer and we're all going to take notes to ourselves. And then we're going to break out into pairs. You and one other person are going to talk about your response to this question. And then we're going to come back as a big group and talk about it. So the prompt is, think of a time when you or someone you know made a mistake that directly hurt or affected an LGBTQIA person. Something that you're embarrassed of maybe, or you made a mistake and you recovered and you're proud of it. Any could be a good outcome, bad outcome. I'll set a timer for, here's our timetable for this, 3 minutes for you to do that solo. and then I'll send you to breakout rooms, and I'll discuss the timing for that in a second. Right, setting the 3-minute timer now.
I do that, Victoria.
That sounds so fun, and also like a very California thing to do, like sit in traffic on the highway and blow bubbles.
I got a party favor 3 years ago, and I put my hand out of the window and I was just blowing bubbles. It was amazing, and the kids behind me had a great time. So now I always have a packet of bubbles in my car in traffic, because it's
That's
either I'm
fun.
singing really loud or I'm blowing bubbles. And I have nobody who's ever looked at me weird and was like, "Ew, bubbles, you're
Oh
so
yeah,
strange,"
that's
Yeah, people are
awesome.
delighted by bubbles. They love them.
They love bubbles.
Right, we're just about at time. I like how y'all just started chatting. That was great. As if we were in person, this would have happened.
Oh yes. Well, I thought of my example, and then I was like, okay, wait, how much time has passed? Bubbles.
Bubbles.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So next, we're going to send you to breakout rooms. I'll give you a minute to chat and introduce yourself to each other. And then you'll have a little banner at the top, which is easy to miss. Try to notice it. And I'll say when person A should go, and then I'll say person B should go 3 minutes later. You'll each get 3 minutes to share your example and talk through it. Then we'll come back and talk about them as a big group.
Oh, if that is the case that you're going to be running that, Casey, do you want to run it on your end then? Which I think you should be able to see it.
Sure. I'll
If I
click it.
run it on mine, it puts you in there and I'm the one left out.
True. Come on, Zoom.
I think bubbles are an underrated party favor.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right,
With the
I'm gonna open the rooms. Any questions before I send you off?
Mm-mm.
Great. Rooms are opened. And Christina, you and I will stay here.
Oh, okay. All right. Sounds good. Nice mix.
Looks like Ramesh is paired with Trevor, but hasn't gone. Give him a minute. I might send you in, Christina.
Okay, that's fine.
Would you mind taking yourself to room 2?
Yeah, I can do that.
Oh, it's muted. While they're in breakout rooms, if you're watching a recording of this, feel free to scrabble forward. Hey, welcome back. Sorry if that felt abrupt. It always does. Thank you, Zoom. All right, we are still recording, by the way. If you don't want to share anything on recording, don't feel any pressure to. If you do want to share some things that you just discussed in your pairs, now's the time. I'd like to hear like what came up with this prompt when you discussed it.
I'll start.
Trevor.
So I have two friends, and talking to them has always been a safe space. And one of them I've known, oh my gosh, probably like 16, 17 years now, and they transitioned female to male. And then another friend who transitioned as well, mostly goes like non-binary. And so I had asked them last week, after years, like I've always actually been terrified to even just participate in the conversations and topics, but can I actually explain what my point of view is and just help me work through these character flaws that I have in myself? Because growing up in the Pacific Northwest, words that we used openly are not appropriate to say today as it pertains to this community. And they're just like, okay, you see it this way, work on seeing it this way. Don't use these terminologies, understand and put yourself in the shoes of somebody who is just almost always going to be bashed by another community. And I came out of that a lot less afraid to have the conversation, and just super appreciative of these two friends for allowing me to just open that and have a safe space to talk about it.
I love it. Great story. Happy ending too. Now you're more comfortable. You're more able to be supportive.
Yeah.
I like that, Trevor. And I'll share a story about a good friend of mine who came out as gay after college and had always dated women and had always been a very masculine, bro-y kind of guy. And I think when he came out to certain friends and families, they kind of expected that he was going to become more feminine and he was going to dress more feminine and act more feminine. And he said it was really meaningful for me to just be like, okay, and not question anything, and just to kind of accept him as he's still the person he's always been. He's just now dating men of the same gender. So I think we were talking about just all the assumptions that people bring into the conversation when someone comes out as a member of this community, and to try to take a step back and just be willing to accept them for who they are and let them give you more information about whatever that means for them and their personality.
I love it. Accept them for who they are. It's a great little tidbit. Anyone else want to share? You don't have to. It's okay. But I'm thankful that you all had these discussions, because now you have examples to think about for the rest of the talk. And if you couldn't come up with one, that's okay too. You've got other people's. Thank you for sharing, both of you. All right, onward with our slides, which are still sharing, right? Please. Thank you. Good. Thank you, Zoom. All right, I'm going to talk now a little bit about why context is so important. Here is what it might feel like in one of those situations you're in. You're being told all these conflicting things. Don't let your biases and stereotyping instincts win that we all have. Instead, treat people as individuals, but don't ignore their background and experiences, but also don't ask them about those things. Instead, just be a good person and just magically know everything, okay? Deal? Ha! That's what it feels like a lot of the time for me too. And I'm a queer man. I don't know it all, but I feel like I'm supposed to immediately magically know it all. How are we supposed to get there? This diagram, I hope you like GraphViz. It's not my most beautiful one. I haven't beautified it. I'm gonna circle some things here as we talk through them. So we know something that we should avoid is assumptions and biases. We shouldn't just assume all gay men are feminine, for example. That's counterproductive. So those are things that we want to notice and counter. That's a piece of the puzzle here. A lot of pieces though. All right, let's look at another one. You do want to focus on someone's individual experience. That's good. That's them. Like if he wasn't feminine and he's just himself a masculine kind of guy, that's him. That's his individual experience. But Oh, I have a story to go with this, my own too. I am a gay man and I went to get my hair cut somewhere. And the woman cutting my hair kept making all these RuPaul's Drag Race references, like saying, "Oh, honey, slay," and like all these trope things that a lot of gay men are really into, but I'm not. And I told her so up front. I don't watch that. I don't like it. And she kept making those statements the whole time. And maybe she loves it. That's great and all, but she was doing it partly because I'm a gay man and she was stereotyping me and assuming I like those things, even though I literally told her I don't. It's just so hard for her to break out of it. So she was taking the group's experience of gay men in general, the average gay man, the most common experience of gay men, and stereotyping me with it. So that's this a red dotted line on the right. What I wish she could have done is she knows about my gay background culture, and she knows my individual experience because I told her, and then my experience in that context is way better for her understanding my actual experience. This reminds me also of colorblind was a popular term in like the 90s and thousands. Like, oh, I'm colorblind. I don't see color. Everybody's the same to me, black, white, whatever. And that's in here too, like focusing on the individual experience only and ignoring the group experience. Like Black people have different experiences in their lives than the average white person. That's a thing. And to look at the individual without that is missing some pieces. So what we really want you to do is to understand an individual in their context. And so for part of today's workshop, I'll take you through some of the contexts that queer people are in so that can help you understand queer people you meet. And in lieu of that, see the one I say the best there, that's what I'm aiming for today, I'm trying to equip you for it. In lieu of that, at least focus on their individual experience. Treat them as an individual without taking into consideration their group's experience that you might not know, and that's the best. Stereotyping would be much worse. Someday I'll make this more beautiful. And if any of you have design ideas for me, let me know. Like all this stuff is kind of messy. And that's probably why it's so hard to talk about, because this is the dependency graph for it, for better or worse. All right, so that's why context is important. I want you to understand the group experience to understand me in context. How can you even learn about this context though? There are a lot of ways. If we sat down and thought of it, we could come up with 20 ways you could learn about the context that your gay man friend or whoever might be experiencing. You could read articles about what it's like, read books on it, watch documentary movies. Those are all great to get the general context. You can attend workshops like this one to better understand the concepts in the context. You can ask people who aren't affected, but who are aware of things like allies, someone who knows a lot of queer people, but isn't queer. And it's less labor for them, probably. Although you get less nuanced to the direct experience. They don't have the direct experience. You can also ask the affected people themselves. And that's okay if they consent. And it's not okay if they don't consent. And a lot of people make that mistake. And then a lot of people say, I can never ask, which is also not true because a lot of people consent and they would like to talk to you about their experience. Like me, I literally make a tweet every couple months, like ask me about queer things. I'll tell you whatever. I'm very open. I have energy and emotional bandwidth to talk to even strangers about queer topics. Like, what does it mean to XYZ? I can find an article for you. And so to say you can never ask me, a queer person, about queer things is like too far to the extreme. But checking for consent is important. I just drew this on my desk today. I'm testing this out. Let me know what you think about it in the chat sidebar if you want. When I'm evaluating a source to learn about a context, I'm thinking about, for example, a family member of mine has a trans child and they want to learn about that experience and they care about it very personally. It's very personally important to them, even if it's not themselves. And they want sources that help them understand that person. So I have two spectrums here. One is personal importance. Like if it's important to you personally, that's the highest personal importance, very far on the end. If it's like a family member, it's a little further. If it's like a stranger you work with, it's further. A stranger on the internet might be even further. And imagining a theoretical person who may or may not exist would be very, very far, like not personally very relevant. The other one is relevance to the context. So if it's like the same situation, a parent helping their trans child come out and navigate the world, that's very relevant to that experience of the parent. Or a story of a trans child, what that's like, that's very relevant to this trans child situation. But like a gay man coming out is a little bit less relevant. That's okay. Maybe that would help you understand it. And there's like a gradation there too. You probably can't get the very top right best thing ever if it's not your direct experience. But then how can you get close to it? Triangulation is my strategy. So you can try to get things that are very personally important, someone you do care about with something kind of related. That's the B there. Or something that's very relevant, but you're not connecting to the person, like a documentary, and like triangulate. This is a new idea for me. Let me know if you like it later, if you're thinking about it later, or if you have a spin on it. That would be really interesting to me too. But whenever I'm thinking about how to learn a context, like I want both, and I can't have both in one source probably. So I'm willing to get both of those options and triangulate.
I really like the your accesses on this, your relevance and the personal importance. And I was just thinking of like certain examples,
Oh, cool, good.
how that looks like, if you were just giving a topic or something, how that actually looks like important to me makes it more relevant. And if not, like hot dogs, that's not relevant or personally important to me. And that'd be on the bottom left quadrant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, very cool.
Good. If we had a longer workshop, which I do sometimes, this might be one of my prompts and we discuss it. But not today. We have a lot more to cover. This can be homework if you want. Feel free to take a screenshot of this and think about it more. Anyway, okay, that's enough of that new content. Here's some more content I've talked about, way more that I can get through smoother. You may have heard of the circles of grief or ring theory. In the center is someone who's directly affected, and the outside is someone who's not affected at all. The common example of this, if you've heard of it, is when someone passes away. Their partner of the person who passed away, their widow or widower, is the most affected often. And they're in the very center and they need the most support. You send support in and you can send grief out. People on the outside can support them on the inside and listen and validate and comfort. People in the middle are family, which are also affected, but less directly affected. And then people outside of that are on the outer edge, like friends of the family who's less affected, might be further out. This applies also to understanding people in their context. Here I might say that the outer part is like articles, books, documentaries, is like very distant. And then workshops like this is a little closer. I'm a person you can imagine now. I'm saying things, even if you don't know me well. Someone in the middle is like someone you're closer to who's not affected, like your friend who's an ally and has queer friends. When the inner one is the people the most affected, the affected people themselves. And that's where you really need to check for consent. You don't need to ask a book for consent. It's kind of nice. You can just read the book. But you do have to ask the people on any other part of the spectrum. And it's more important the closer to the center you are too. So whenever I'm evaluating how to get context, this comes into mind also. This is, by the way, one of those two axes from the sticky note. All right. Any questions on that? Any comments? Feel free to chat. I have the chat open, or you can unmute.
Well, it's interesting because I do feel like people are using me as that unaffected peer. Like since I post and repost like trans and gay content, people are like, oh, I can ask you my question about trans women in sports or whatever it is. So I get a lot of those fielded. It kind of helps me think like, okay, this is my place in the circle.
Yeah. And I think you're helping. How does it feel to be that person for them?
It feels good. My like blood gets raised a little bit. Like I'll spend like whole days being like angry about certain things. I'm like, well, now that I'm thinking about it, that's really messed up that there's this news article out there trying to spin this way, because it's not the case at all. So yeah, I don't know if they just like enjoy seeing me all riled up, or they're maybe a mix of that and also generally interested in learning.
Sure.
So it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that can be exhausting. But it's also that kind of righteousness is powerful. It's a powerful force. When you see something wrong and want to fix it, know you can do something about it, affect some people. So glad you have the time and energy and are willing to spend it. And on the flip side, if you had answered, it's too much and I wish people did it less, I want to help, but it's too much for me, then boundary setting might be what I would say there. It's possible at times that would be a good thing to focus on for you too. If it ends up being too much for the person, boundary setting is okay. Consent, they need your consent for you to. I have a feeling you were on it, Victoria. Oh, great, thank you. All right, next, let's go into the alphabet, the LGBTQIA alphabet. there's a lot here. We'll build it up one piece at a time. No wonder people have questions about the alphabet all the time. Look at all these arrows. We'll build it up to that. Oh, and here's a simpler one that we'll build up to. This is the one we'll actually build up to. Let's just take the smallest, simplest one, LGBT. That's the most commonly used one. It's often used to mean LGBTQ or LGBTQIA. It implies the others, for better or worse. It is shorter. LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bi, and trans. 3 of those are sexual/romantic orientations, and 1 is about gender identity. So if you're a lesbian, you're a woman attracted to women. If you're gay, you're a man attracted to men. If you're bi, you're either attracted to either. And that's all assuming that you and the people around you are on this gender binary, which is its own topic. We'll dig into it in a sec. But assuming that you identify as the one gender and are defining your sexual romantic orientation according to just one other, these are pretty good labels. I'm a gay man. I'm a man and I'm attracted mostly to men and less to women and non-binary people. That's what I'm attracted to. All right, and then trans on the right is a gender identity term. And there's a whole bunch of others for that too. Here, trans means that you were assigned a gender at birth based on chromosomes or genitals, or it gets complicated, whatever the doctor decided. If you were an edge case, we'll get to that too. And gender identity that's a term that relates to gender identity. It doesn't relate to sexual and romantic orientation. Anyway, all right, next slide, LGBTQ. Q refers to any of those 4. It's an umbrella term. That's why you often hear people just say queer instead of LGBTQIA+. It's a little bit shorter. It's easier to say. I prefer it personally too. I don't really need my coworkers to understand that I'm a man attracted to men. I just want them to know I'm like queer. Don't assume the default norms apply to me. Just don't assume those things, okay? That's what I want people to know. And if I change my mind on anything, or if I end up dating a woman, because there's a small number of women I'm attracted to, don't be surprised, I'm queer. Like, I'm just saying I don't fit the norm. Oh, another thing on queer is it used to be a slur and it's been reclaimed. A good rule of thumb on whether it's okay to use a term or not is whether people self-identify as that. Like Jew is not a slur. Jewish people say, I'm a Jew. I'm not Jewish, but my friends do. And I can say like Jew and it is not a slur. I kind of hesitate because I was raised to hesitate on saying any kind of racial word because I was raised in the colorblind period of time in the neighborhood I grew up in. So I hesitate a little bit myself, but it's not a slur. It's a self-identification term. There are other ones like the N-word that I won't even say because it is self-identification, but it's like exclusive to that group. Queer is more like Jew. Straight people can say queer and it's fine. There is, however, a segment of queer people who are older, who were raised and like grew up and lived in the times when queer was a slur and they haven't reclaimed it themselves. Some people don't want to use the word queer. So it depends on your audience. For me, I'd rather you call me queer than gay. Like they're both true. You can use either. It's good. I won't complain, but queer is more what I identify with. All right. Ooh. IA. Let's add the IA on here. Where do they go? Let's start on the right. Intersex is related to gender identity. And then I'll get into that more in a second. I have more slides. And then the A, sometimes you see LGBTQIA because there's 2 of them, asexual and aromantic. Sexuality and romantic orientation are different and distinct. We'll get into that more too. You could be, just for a quick example, romantically attracted to men, but only sexually attracted, or I have examples. We'll get to them. I don't need to come up with one on the spot. Intersex, I want to talk about this one. Gender is complicated. I did not convey all of gender in this slide, but I hope this high level thing will communicate some of it to you. How is gender determined? You could look at chromosomes, XX or XY, but sometimes there's XXY or there's other combinations of them. You could instead look at genetics, like if they have the gene that transcribes producing more testosterone or not, or the set of genes, there's probably several genes for that, or hormones themselves, hormone levels. If someone who's producing more or less testosterone or the other, that's another way you could determine gender. But what if someone has like a thyroid issue, they're not making the same level of hormones, or like testicular cancer could affect your ability to make testosterone from the testes. And like, there's a million variations here. And if that drops, does that change your gender? Question mark. Another one is body characteristics and genitalia. And when a doctor is trying to assign gender, which is, they have to assign gender. It's like a thing they do. It's not just a term that queer people use, but doctors assign gender around birth based on some of these. And if they seem to conflict, they have to pick something, or they do pick something. They wouldn't have to in theory, but in our culture they do. So anyway, intersex people have something that's not the most common of chromosomes and genetics and hormone expression and body characteristics and genitalia. Something is different than the most common. And then there's a term for that, intersex. Right, a little more on asexual and aromantic. Sexual attraction and romantic attraction are separate. So someone could be romantic. Imagine a woman romantically interested in a man, and she wants to marry him and have babies and live together for happily ever after forever. But she might not be sexually attracted to anyone ever. She might be willing to have sex to have kids, sure. She might even enjoy sex, but she doesn't have attraction. She doesn't have sexual attraction. Like when you find someone attractive and want to do sexual things with them, like that desire, the desire for that could just be absent, and that would be asexual. I don't expect you to remember every little thing I'm saying here. I'm just trying to give you examples, like anything you might assume might be not true for someone. There's also terms here at the bottom, gray romantic, which is like not zero romance, but, or actually that term, it varies by who uses it, what it means. First of all, some amount, but it often means that you're only sexually attracted to someone if you're also romantically attracted to them. So romance is a prerequisite to feeling sexual attraction. That's an experience a lot of people have. That's a term you could look up and hear stories about. Demisexual here is you experience less sexual attraction overall, but some, and you don't want to say asexual. It's kind of like some sexual, low sexual, although asexual may or may not include them. Like some people say they do, some people say they don't. People who are asexual exclude or include depending on the group you're in. And words are hard, and we're developing new words for this all the time, which is why it's hard and is changing. It's kind of like in programming. Eventually you might need to refactor a term, refactor a variable or a function and make it something else to fit your environment. But it used to help, used to work. But as we're understanding the domain better of the app that we're building, we might need to change the words. Oh, so many terms. If you remember any of them, that's great. But if you just remember that there's a lot and don't trust your assumptions, that's good too. You don't have to remember every word I'm saying. So that's the alphabet, and the alphabet has a lot of letters in it. But there's really just two core ideas, those circles there, sexual romantic orientation, gender identity, that I want to focus on. And if you were studying this academically, you might say gender, sexual, and romantic minorities. People who are in the minority group who were on any of those three things, you're different than the majority. And then we come down to these things, which are way more discrete and way easier to talk about to me. This is like the core ideas in it: gender identity, pronouns, gender expression, and then sexual attraction, romantic attraction. Let me sit with this for a second. I'm going to dig into those left three on the next slide. Here is a composable gender graph that I drew for myself. My gender is male, my gender identity. The pronouns I use are he, him, and my gender expression tends toward masculine, although it's kind of androgynous at times. Right now I'm wearing like bright pink shorts and they're very tight, but some days I don't know, I might wear like baggy jeans. And so that's me, and anyone could have any combination of any of these three things. Just because there's a correlation of masculine, he, him, and male doesn't mean that's true for everyone. If I wore a dress, which I don't tend to do, I don't like them, then my gender expression will be feminine, but I might still go by he, him, and my gender might still be male. I feel male, feel male, and I might present feminine. And every combination is possible.
Casey?
Yeah.
What are other forms of expression? I know you mentioned clothing. Could you give us other examples of that? Is it strictly clothing?
Yeah, gender expression I have to admit, I'm not like an expert in this. This is me speaking for other people's experiences because I kind of fit into the gender expression norms. But clothing, like hair, makeup, dress,
I mean, you're like voice.
tone of voice. Yeah,
Mhm.
voice for sure. I don't have the most masculine voice, and I know it. That's true.
And like mannerisms too, just like
Yeah, like the hand thing.
Mhm.
And some of them are even signaling. So like the hand thing that some gay men do, literally, whether they're doing it on purpose or not, it's signaling I'm gay.
Yeah.
And like I would like people around me to know I'm gay. And if I wear a rainbow pin, that I'm signaling I'm at least queer friendly. I'm probably queer. Not a strong thing that I'm saying or not, but it's like signaling. And if you know rainbows are queer, you'll know. And if you don't know, it's fine. I'll just move on. It's
Yeah. I've
it's like
also
wearing
said that. Yeah.
It's like if you wore a Python shirt to a coffee shop, people who know will know what that is. And people who don't are gonna like leave you alone. It's that signaling. Were you gonna say something else, Victoria?
I was gonna say, I know men who are straight and identify as men, but they like grew up in a household with all women and they have more feminine vocals and mannerisms, and people often mistake them for being gay, but that's not the case.
Yeah, great example. So for them, it would be male, he, him, feminine, gender expression. And gender expression, we could decompose in like a data sense and break it down into 100 or 1,000 variables. We could group them into categories if we wanted to dataify everything. That's not my goal, but like if we wanted to be very discrete about everything like programmers tend to do, I do kind of think that way a little bit on some level. And of course, there's more genders than 3 and more pronouns than 3. This is a simplified version here even. Ooh, pronouns. I drew this. I'm trying to get good at Illustrator. I use the knockoff one, the Affinity Designer, because it doesn't have a subscription. I love that company. Anyway, here's for Casey Watts, how each pronoun makes me feel. If you refer to me as he, him, I don't love it like at the very extreme end, but like, yeah, that's me. I use he, him. If you call me she, her, I'm not that offended. Some people are way further in the hate end of this thing, but I'm like, no, you're wrong. You're mischaracterizing me. Like, support people. If I call in for support and they say, yes, ma'am, like, no, that's annoying. I don't like it. If someone says they, them, it's good. It's fine. I like it. I accept it. I wouldn't complain about it, but I prefer he, him. So the checkboxes on the left, you see like use he, him. For me, that's what I want you to use. That's the one that's approved. If it's for approval voting, I approve only the one, even though I have like slight positive for they, them. There's a section of this later where I'll give you some time to think about this for yourself. Right, I want to switch into this next section about identity and signaling. So like, I'll give myself as an example first. Here is 2 parts of my identity. The above the line is like the public higher level things I want people to know that might be in my Twitter bio. And the things below the line are true about my identity, but not things that I want to signal that I want everybody to know necessarily. So I wrote the book, Debugging Your Brain. Yeah, I'd love it if everyone knew that. That's a big part of my life. I spent a long time writing it, and it's important to me. I like telling people I own and play an instrument in every color. It's fun. It's a hobby. I spend a lot of time on it. And I'm culturally queer. I like having a rainbow on things. And that signals to people that I'm someone they can be themselves around, hopefully. I'm trying to signal that about any queer topic or other types of things where they might be a minority. Seeing a minority status on me means I might be more relatable. I might understand them and care about it more as someone who understands being like having the outcomes of being a minority, all of those. And then below the line here is I'm culturally queer. Like I hang out with some gay men, but also a lot of lesbians and non-binary people and trans people, like in my marching band. And you'll meet some of my marching band friends in a slide here soon. Like I'm just in this space with so many types of queer people, and I don't go to the gay bars where they watch RuPaul's Drag Race. I don't go. I have some friends who invite me, and every time I decline, I don't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I don't like it when they're mean. I like the performance well enough, but I don't want the culture of drag queens affecting the way I talk or my life or anything like that. I don't want it. But I don't care to explain that to everyone. I'm explaining it to you all because we're here in this group and you care. And so that distinction is important to me. I'm culturally queer. I'm not culturally gay. In like the spaces I inhabit and the things I say and do are more queer, general, big group than gay men. I'm sexually and romantically gay, but I don't need that on my profile. That's not signaling as much as I want. I have a partner. I'm not looking for anyone. I don't need to signal that. I'm cisgender. I don't feel any need to signal that. I identify as male, and I'm like male and androgynous expression in my address, but I don't need to convey how I dress on the internet either. Like LinkedIn and Twitter, you barely see pictures of me and how I look. It's not important to my professional identity. So this is like my identity that I signal at the top and my like non-signaled identity at the bottom. If you're going to ask me a question on the street or at a conference or at a meetup, the top part is safer. I'm more likely to want to talk about those things that I'm like spreading that are true about me. It's top of mind. I care about it a lot. And the things on the bottom, I'm telling you, I'm fine talking about them, but a lot of people might not if it's not what they're putting forward as their identity, public identity. It is less safe to ask someone, oh, you might be trans. Tell me all about trans. They get asked that way too much. It's a microaggression. I have a whole workshop series that covers things like microaggressions. This is just one piece of it. But anyway, like that's the below the line part. I might move this earlier sometime, but specific versus ambiguous they. I use he to be specific, but if you don't know my gender, like if you're a help desk support person, you said they, that's great. That's the ambiguous they. This is like a Spanish verb chart in my head. This is how I think of it. If you know someone's specific gender, use that. And if it's ambiguous, you can use that one. And sometimes the singular non-binary, that case, the third row, some people, the specific version of they, of their pronoun is they. So then you can go from, I don't know this person's gender, they, to, oh, their specific pronoun is they. And it feels like a shift in my head. And there have been efforts to use something like ze, as a pronoun so that it looks different, but it didn't catch on, hasn't caught on. And they is more the direction, the more common one that we're seeing.
I feel like I will die on the hill that says that they is an acceptable pronoun for when you don't know the person's gender, because a lot of people try to tell me that it's not accurate in a grammatic way, but it is accepted.
Yeah.
They said so. Webster's dictionary and everything.
Webster's,
So,
APA. APA
yeah,
is the one I go by the most. They used to say he, she was the one to use. They is wrong. They used to say that. They did. Anyone claiming that, they're right as of, I don't know, 20 years ago for sure.
right. Yeah.
As of 2022, sorry, they updated it. Times have changed and we refactored that. It has a new name now. Like
It's
a new
so much
acceptable
better. So much better than he, she. I mean, that's he or she. It's not good. Just
Yeah.
the thing.
I prefer it too. But anyway, regardless of anyone's personal preference, you could still not prefer it. You could disprefer it. You'd rather use he, she. But they is correct by APA standards, which is the most commonly used one for any writing that I've done. Yeah, it's allowed. I've got citations too. I should have that in the notes. I don't think I do. But you can literally look it up on APA. And if someone bothers you, send them that APA style guide page about this. They might want to know it. Or they're being disingenuous, which happens too. All right, welcome to, this is my friend, Krista. She is a geneticist. This is her Twitter profile picture. She played saxophone in the queer marching band. She identifies as a bibliophile. That's on her Twitter profile. All this is on her Twitter profile. I pulled this from her public Twitter profile. She's ace and gray romantic and queer. Those are top above the line for her. She does talk about those things a lot. She's a big advocate. She reposts things about being ace. Ace is short for asexual, by the way. Gray row is short for gray romantic, another term that came up earlier. And her pronouns are she or they. And I asked her, I don't recommend just asking anybody this, but I asked her if she had a preference between she or they. I know both are acceptable because she put both of them there. I didn't have to ask for that. They both get check marks. But is there a slight preference? And she said, for me, no. For other people I know, yes. And it's not always the first one. Like it's likely the first one in the order, but it might not be. My advice is to use whichever one and just go with it. Some people, though, prefer they because it signals that you care about this and are willing to do the less common thing, and then you're like a safer person to be around. But I mean, she doesn't care. And I started calling her she originally years ago, and I know she doesn't mind that. It's literally here. She is so cool. I'm like a fan of her. She moved away. I'm so sad. She used to live in DC, here in DC's queer marching band. Another friend here is Avi. He loves rabbits and cheesecake and cute things. This is his Twitter profile. Hacker, queer, trans, non-binary. Those are top of the line identity, above the line. I like to chase after telephone wires. I think that's a hacking reference. I know he does some white hat hacking and some like lock picking, things like that. I don't really know what that is, and I should ask him sometime. But that would be a great icebreaker if I saw him again. What does that line on your Twitter bio mean? Because he's like putting it out there in the world. It's a great icebreaker. Trevor knows Avi. Oh, I miss him too. He also moved away. All right, now's the time for you to think about yourself. This might be uncomfortable for you. It might be. You might not have asked yourself some of these questions. I'm going to rush through these. You're not going to get time to really go through them because of time constraints on the meetup. But think on a scale of -10 to 10, hate it to love it. 0 would be neutral. If someone used he, him pronouns on you, how does that make you feel? Good at all? Bad at all? Completely neutral? Anything's possible on the scale. If someone you know used the pronouns she or her on you, good, bad, hate it, love it, where in the scale? Somewhere near the middle, somewhere near the edge. If someone you know used the pronouns they, them, is that similar to either of the others, different from them? I showed you mine earlier.
It's definitely an uncomfortable question that I guess nobody really asked me before.
Yeah.
And so that wonderful profile pic that I have with my mustache, I love it so much, but only until I kind of started putting it out there as my profile pic. I've had a couple people just question my pronouns, and I've never really like stated it up front. I don't put it in my signature or anything, and they're like, oh, I think Christina's a they. I'm not sure. I'm like, you know, and then seeing your spectrum, Casey, how you had it, like, I don't mind it if they say they. I don't love it. You know, it's not like my favorite thing. I'm definitely, in my terms, she and her. But I can see why, in context of just looking at my image and my big mustache on my face, that people could question that. But I never thought about it a year ago, right? It's kind of being brought up more now that I push out that image. And you know, I got a couple of speaking engagements. My boss is like, you sure you want this one to be the one? I'm like, I love it. It's great. It's quirky. But only in kind of context of pronouns, people kind of question like, oh, is she a they? And I'm like, oh,
sure.
I don't want to change it. It doesn't like upset me that they do that, but I can kind of see it being like, oh, questionable. Like, okay.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way. But yeah, that's I like the spectrum that you had, and I'm pretty similar to that spectrum. Like, I don't mind it, don't love it, but I won't like come at somebody's throat.
Yeah,
you know?
sure. And it sounds like you might not be inclined to put your pronouns in your name everywhere without prompting. That's okay too.
Yeah.
We'll get to how that might help others in a bit. But for yourself, if you don't feel the urge, that's a data point. It's true. Sure. Yep. It doesn't help me a lot personally to include my pronouns. People guess that I'm he, him pretty reliably. And if they say they, them, I'm fine with that too. You know, So personally for me, it's not a big deal. But I do it anyway. We'll get back to that.
Yeah, I feel kind of similar or interesting, Christina, because I once put she and they in my profile, partly because like I don't really mind if people call me they, because I feel so strongly that it's a acceptable like generic gender pronoun. But then I kind of felt like maybe I'm representing myself as something that other than I am, and like encroaching on a group that I'm like not a part of. So I was like, maybe I'll just put it back to she or so that's what I went up with. But I kind of say like a signal like, no, I'm cool. I'm fine with they. I can be a they. Everyone can be a they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to, I don't think you're encroaching on anyone. I think it's popularizing it, making it easier for people who really do have a strong preference to do it. But if you also don't want to deal with having questions asked, now you relate to them a little bit more too, because they might, if they do prefer they, them, they might get more questions asked about it. And that can be a microaggression at the point, like many paper cuts hurt a lot.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It's like, oh, now you're a part of this group. And it's like, oh, well, I didn't realize that you were going to make all these assumptions about me as soon as I did that. Exactly.
All right, we got a lot more. I'll go through these quicker than the last one. How would you feel if you dressed up for whatever reason in a traditionally male way? I'm thinking at the extreme, like camo cargo pants. It was like the aesthetic in my high school for a lot of guys, and fewer women. Or if you dressed up in an androgynous way, I'm thinking like Star Trek, aliens in gray jumpsuits. I kind of like it personally. I do. A female way, like flamenco dress is an image I have. How would you feel? Scale. I don't really want that. I don't feel comfortable. Yay, Avi. In the chat. All right. Do you feel more male or female? This is hard to measure and hard to describe, but do you have any attachment to maleness or femaleness, however you might define it, different than gender expression or pronouns like we talked about earlier? Half and
That's
half.
an interesting question.
Yeah. There is research that uses basically this kind of question, like identify as male, identify as female. That's like the best we got because everything else is a proxy for this like internal concept that we have.
Yeah. I mean, in my head, and again, I don't know if comes off offensive, but in my head, I don't think I'm a girly girl. And I know that could be like a microaggression in terms, but I definitely lean more on the masculine side. Like, and now I'm almost questioning, am I a they? And I don't know it yet.
Yeah, could be.
Could be the start of your journey, Christina.
Could be the start. This could be the talk that lifted it all up, you know?
Yeah. I think it's also
change your mind over time. You can identify differently in different contexts, even at home or at work could be different.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Meeting new people could be different. You could try it on. A lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Your like expression of it doesn't necessarily need to change like who you like other parts of your gender identity or orientation as well.
Yeah.
Well said.
Interesting.
I love it. This is part of the gay agenda. Just getting people to question parts of their identity they've been assuming was the normal, the standard, the common. Just question it. I don't care if you change your mind or whatever, but I want you to be true to yourself. And I guess also balance that with society's response. Sure. All right, next question. How sexually attracted are you to each of these presentations on average? Someone male presenting, strong attraction, strong repulsion, somewhere in the middle, partway. Androgynous presenting, is it different? Female presenting, is that different? How romantically attracted are you to these? That might be different. It might be the same. For some people, it's the same. Male presenting, androgynous presenting, female presenting. All right, enough of that. You can consider all of these on your own later. And if it's interesting to you a little bit, I'd encourage you to do it. You can journal about it or talk to a friend about it. And you can ask them if they want to discuss this with you too. Feel free to pull up these slides and go through them. It's also the same questions as that big chart that we covered. All right, next section. We've been talking for a while here. I want to take a quiet minute for us to transition away from thinking about yourselves to thinking about how to change culture. So this is like making an inclusive work environment or inclusive meetup group culture that we have here, that kind of thing. I'll give you a minute to transition out of this introspection. I'll set a timer for, maybe I'll give you 2 minutes actually. Timer set. If you want to take notes and dump your thoughts out, you can do that too. I'm gonna drink some water. I'm very thirsty. 30 more seconds and then I'll start talking again. All right, welcome back. Shifting gears from thinking about ourselves to changing the culture around us. I actually have an entire workshop that's this section that I just condensed because it goes together with the other content so well, I didn't want to skip it, but I have an hour and a half about this. We only have half an hour left in the meetup. Just gonna give the highlights. All right, pronouns. I'm going to talk through pronoun adoption, which you've been seeing happen over the last 10 years. This is the innovation adoption lifecycle, or like I call it the curve of adoption. You might have seen this before. I heard about this from the concept of smartphones. It's like the innovators, the earliest ones are like Blackberries way back in the day. And then eventually iPhones happened, and then more people had that, an early majority, and then Android came up too, and now more people have it. But there are laggards, like my mom's best friend has a flip phone still. She does not want a smartphone. She might, I mean, laggard, she might not ever get it. She was on this very end of the adoption tail. Some people had Blackberries way, way early, and this happened over time. This one happens to assume it's a normal distribution curve, but you know, it might not be normal. It might be up and down and any kind of shape. But I really like how this model of change and the terms that it has applies to pronouns and adoption. Adoption of putting pronouns in profiles. If you want people to share their pronouns and like upfront, one of my favorite ways is in Slack. You can put it in the Slack profile. There's a field for that. And anybody joining the company who updates their name or whatever, they'll get prompted to put it all in. At meetup groups, if we do in-person events, having an example name tag that has pronouns in the corner really helps. Even though I'm someone I want to have my pronouns included anywhere I can, I don't always remember to do it. It takes some prompting. But if there's a name tag example there that says he, him in the corner as just an example, I got it. I can follow that pattern, no problem, I'm on it. Or if I join a Zoom and I see other people have he, him, and I might update mine because I see that. If you do introductions in a circle, another way to do that is to share your pronouns there. And for that, I think of it like how we used to say Mr. and Miss a lot more. I mean, probably before my time, honestly, but like it used to be very popular. You'd say Mr., Miss, or Mrs. And that was always included in anybody's signature. And that encoded the pronouns. And now they're gone. And I kind of like that we dropped the formality of it. I never cared for that kind of formality, but we lost information when we dropped those. That's part of why I think pronouns are becoming more popular, because I think they're more needed. You can't assume Casey is male or female when you read my name. So I don't even blame the support people for assuming one or the other. I'd rather them not know and use they, because they know they don't know. But it doesn't say Mr. Watts in a lot of systems. How could they know?
Not all names are like really obvious what the gender is based on, especially names from a different culture. You don't know.
True. Yeah, Casey's a good one. I get misgendered a lot, honestly. It's like 50-50 if someone's going to guess that I'm male or female. There's plenty of male Caseys. Casey Kasem, Casey at Bat, the baseball one, Casey Jones, that's the one I'm named after, the railroad engineer. My parents tell me it's not from the Grateful Dead song where he drove off the tracks because of drugs. Not that. They're just because he was very good. They tell me that all the time. He was a very good engineer, you know. And but there are a lot of female cases too, and it's more common to be a female name lately than a male. Anyway, okay, so there's some adoption techniques here. And another idea is practicing. So if you have a friend whose pronouns have changed recently, for example, it's a good time to practice, or someone whose pronouns you get wrong sometimes, like you would assume they're one gender different than what they are, or assuming that their pronouns are different than they are, you can practice. When I first started using they, them pronouns, it was hard. It takes reprogramming and to find all the mistakes I would make in speech and correct each and every one of those, because they're different. They're different parts of speech, different types of sentences, different sentence structures. And there's some tools online. There's a whole bunch of them. I don't have any handy, but I can find some if somebody wants, that every sentence structure comes up and you can practice. Like, oh, they went to the store to get their Coca-Cola, or like every part of it. It helps if you have a person in mind to practice on. And then, so that's practicing. Another part of it is practicing how to recover when you make a mistake. So if you use the wrong pronoun on someone, if someone says, oh yeah, Casey, she's in the other room. Oh, sorry, I mean he. Like, just do it quickly and move on is generally the best way to do it, not to dwell on it. Oh, I'm so bad and I get this wrong all the time. And now let's talk about me and how I have guilty feelings about pronouns a lot, instead of quickly correcting yourself and moving on. Acknowledge it and move on is the best. In another workshop, I have us practice that, but we don't have time today. That's okay. So you have to practice pronouns and you have to practice recovering when you make mistakes inevitably. Another part of that is if you can reframe it so that you don't feel guilty, that'll show in your speech. That's good if you can. If you do feel very guilty every time you get a pronoun wrong, that's a recipe for making the other person feel worse, because it'll show. But if you can acknowledge to yourself, I will make mistakes some and I will recover gracefully, and that's the best I can do. And I did some practice with flashcards and sentence structures, and I'm just doing my best. I don't feel guilty if I use the wrong pronoun on someone, if I misgender them. I don't feel guilty because I'll correct it and I know how to move on, and it's great. And I care enough to do some pre-work, and they appreciate that. They appreciate effort a lot. Anyone with less common pronouns appreciates it if you intend to get it right. Oh, here's a big concept. This is an idea from sales, and I like to apply it here to pronouns and any cultural change it can apply to too. So this is the AIDA sales funnel, AIDA. People go through these stages generally. So if someone is using the wrong pronouns on a coworker, imagine coworker A is using wrong pronouns on coworker B, and you want to help them use the correct pronouns because you care about coworker B getting the right pronouns used. You can start with awareness, wonder, are they aware of coworker B's pronouns? Do they know? Are they even aware? Maybe they didn't notice it in the Slack handle and Zoom profile. They might have overlooked it. And I'm not going to go through all the examples today, but I have like sentence structures for every one of these steps for things you could say to the person depending on where they are in this framework. A lot of people jump straight to like the wrong section that the person's not in. Like, oh, I just wasn't aware. Now that I'm aware, I'm interested and I desire to make this change, and I will make the action and do it. And like, phew, the only problem was awareness. Or some other people are aware and they don't care about the person or pronouns. And why should they care is how I would approach that one. What would make them care? Do they care about their coworker in a general sense? I hope so. If not, that's harder. There's things we can do there too. So for anyone, for any cultural issue like this, they might go through these 4 stages. I so much want to go into this. All right, next, you can read about IDA sales funnel another time, or if I do this workshop, there's a mailing list link that I'll share at the end, and you can find out when I do the next workshop for bystander to upstander is the name of the one that has this. Here's another image from bystander to upstander. For pronouns or any issue, where are you on this scale? -10 to 10. Do you passively support it but don't say anything? Are you actively someone who puts pronouns in your profile when you show up to a new group and no one is doing it yet, like the very end? Are you recruiting people to add their pronouns to their profile, direct messaging them and like getting more people to do it? That would be like even further. Like, where on the spectrum are you? And then for active, I want to update this graphic sometime. Reactive and proactive are different too. Proactive would be recruiting other people to do it. Reactive would be someone joins who seems like they might be non-binary, and now all of a sudden we're going to add our pronouns, which is good. Do it. Thank you. But you could have done the proactive one. But if you're not going to, like, at least you're reactive. That's great. That's better than doing nothing, but you wouldn't complain. And that's better than not having a stance on the thing at all. Like, if our goal is to get that to happen. I do have more to say on these. Another one on pronouns and adoption. If 5% of people at a company have their pronouns in their Slack profile, then when someone joins and adds their pronouns, it's not weird. We don't even need 100% of people to do it to have the effect of it not being weird for someone to add it. But if there's 0% of people doing it and a non-binary person joins and they use they, them pronouns, for example, it would be weird of them to put it there. It would be the first time anyone's seeing a lot of it, and it's like a change, and why are they doing this change? And so if you are willing, you could be one of the first 5% in any group you're in. And at this point, a lot of the tech groups, a lot of the tech meetup groups and tech companies, they know it happens in the world, so it's not so surprising to do it. And that's helpful to make it less weird for you. And then if you do it and get other coworkers to do it, even a small number of you can change the experience for a non-binary person completely, or someone with pronouns that you wouldn't guess. I care about those coworkers enough to be that proactive person. And I don't think I would have done that 3 or 4 years ago because I didn't think this deeply about it. I was just reactive, and now I'm more proactive because I've thought about it harder and I know more people that it directly affects and helps, and I'm willing to do that. It's very low effort for me. I don't get any pushback, thankfully, in any of the environments I'm in. If someone asks me about pronouns, that's great. It signals that I'm open to talking about this kind of stuff, kind of like the rainbow pin might. Like, I'm someone you could talk to about this stuff. I'm open to talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's also like an important like strategy for companies too, if they want to make their environment seem welcoming and inclusive, because if you're giving those signals and saying we're open to talking about this and we're open to making people feel like they can bring them home selves to work, that gives you an advantage over other companies who maybe like aren't doing that, and people do feel uncomfortable because it's not just those people, it's also their allies that you would be kind of signaling that this isn't a place where that's allowed. So
yeah. And people who are looking for jobs and are aware of all this stuff, like queer people, look at websites and they notice all of this. Like if the website shares pronouns, or if there's a diverse board or a diverse C-suite or anything like that, like people are looking. It does help with hiring if it's true. And I think we can see through it too if a website's pretending. The same person is in all the photos, the same one queer person they have, their token. It's kind of hard to fake it. If you're not queer, you might not notice it at all. You're just not attuned to it. You don't notice the signals that the people are sending out. But a queer person can totally tell how queer friendly a work is by like all the photos on the site. Same for other types of minorities. That whole list earlier I didn't go through, every one of them.
I also thought this would be helpful because I have, friends and parents, friends who think like, why do I have to learn all of this new stuff? Like I put it in this framework. I was like, well, you could be behind the curve and be the last one to ever adopt this, or just never do it. Like that's possible. It's just that all these other people are eventually it's going to get adopted. And this is the way that the world is working now. This is normal for language to change and evolve as we, can grow as a society. So you can decide to be a part of it or not.
Yeah. I like to meet them where they're at. So if they're aware of it, but they might not be interested in that. It might not affect anyone they know personally or care about personally. Maybe they might not know anyone. A lot of like racism is more rampant in places where there is no diversity. Everybody there is white and they just can't imagine people who aren't white, for example. So they're not interested. And I don't know, I can't really blame them if that's their whole experience, that's the culture they grew up in. And I hope they would do better. I would like them to, but if it's not connected to things they care about, how can we connect it to things they care about? That's part of what I do as a consultant. Go to companies that enough leadership care to change things, and then people are open enough to come to workshops like this and talk about it. That's one ingredient. There's a whole bunch though that makes a big cultural change like this. And if you have conservative family who don't respect pronouns and you would like them to be people who respect pronouns, you can take them through each of these stages. So maybe they're interested in talking about it. Like my mom is more conservative than a lot of people I know, and less on the trend of pronouns, less likely to use someone's correct pronouns than the average person. But she does care about me and all my friends. So she's willing to do some work, but then she might not do it. She might be stuck in the action phase. She's just not good at using this pronoun on this person. It's just not something she's used to or comfortable to, she might say, comfortable to do. And so I think she might actually be at the action stage. She's like, she wants to respect my friends. She's decided she'll say she wants to other people, and then she's just got to do it. So practice, I think, would help her.
I was wondering if you find the questions that you asked earlier help people get more awareness and interest about it, because you might not care about misgendering somebody, but if you think about how you would feel if you were misgendered strongly, then that might change your perspective.
Yeah, this goes back to this sticky note that I'm working on lately. This is specifically about that desire and interest part of the funnel. Like, for my mom, it's personally important, not that at the extreme end, but like Casey's friends, she knows them, so that it's that important. And then like using pronouns on someone is more or less relevant to the thing I wanted to change to do. That's the other spectrum. Yeah, what can I find that is the most personally important? And yeah, analyzing yourself. It's probably the most personal thing there is. All right, I intentionally wanted to end my content around 8:15 because I want questions. I'd be happy to stop the recording now and have private questions. I think that would be helpful for some people. Who can hit stop for us?
I got you. I can stop it right now.